What's George Benson doing here?
I think he needs help with something.
What do you mean?
Well, he says he wants me to give him the night.
We're back in the company of senior royalty this week. The Queen of Pentacles is a card all about motherhood, believing in yourself, and finding the magic in the natural world. In the Key to the Tarot, A.E.WAITE says the face suggests that of a dark woman, whose qualities may be summed up in the idea of greatness of soul. She has also the serious cast of intelligence. She contemplates her symbol and may see worlds therein. So we've got that thoughtful and dreamy aspect coming back with this one, similar to what we saw with the Page, but I think that here we've got the added element of nurturing and a love for nature. Rachel Pollack says more than any other minor card, she represents a love for and unity with the world. Now, one thing you'll notice when you look at all of the queens is that in the Cups and Pentacles they seem to be somewhat more introspective than what we find with the Wands and Swords. Again, this comes down to the elements that they represent. I've talked about this quite a lot with regard to the knights in each suit, and I think we can see the same thing here. Fire and air are regarded as active elements, while earth and water are seen as passive. The Queens of Cups and Pentacles stare directly at the symbol of their suit, seemingly lost within them, while the Queens of Wands and Swords are staring straight ahead. Quite a few comparisons to major arcana cards come up here, the Empress probably being the most obvious one. All the queens in the tarot are considered to be connected to this archetype in one way or another, but as the Empress is also thought of as the patron trump of Pentacles, that gives us an especially deep connection between these two cards. We've obviously got them both sitting in a field and surrounded by nature, but if we look carefully at the bottom right of the card, we can also see a rabbit, a symbol of fertility and abundance. That's where the phrase "at it like rabbits" comes from. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Queen is at it like a rabbit. I mean, she might be, but that's her business. I'm talking about how the concept of fertility is one of the things that brings together the Queen and the Empress. The maternal aspect is strong in both of these cards. Another association is to the Magician card back at number 1 in the trumps. On a physical level, this is pretty obvious, from the way both cards are framed with roses, and they're also dressed quite similarly, with a red cloak over a white gown. If we go a little deeper, we can also see a comparison in the way they connect to the potency of life. Rachel Pollack goes on to say, where the Magician manipulates the forces hidden in the world, the Queen of Pentacles joins herself to those forces, allowing them to flow through her into her daily life.
What on earth are you doing with that steak?
I'm knighting it. A rye sirloin.
The Thoth card is another richly detailed one this week. We see the Queen staring off into the distance, where water flows through a barren field. Crowley says the Queen of Discs is throned upon the life of vegetation. She contemplates the background, where a calm river winds through a sandy desert to bring it to fertility. Oases are beginning to shew themselves amid the wastes. One of the things I adore about the Thoth deck is the way Lady Frida Harris incorporated the astrological correspondences into the cards. In this case, we've obviously got the goat to signify Capricorn, but she's also wearing a crown that's got the horns of a Markhor goat with their corkscrew shape. Her dress has been described as reptilian owing to the scales, and she sits on one of the most elaborate thrones in any of the tarot decks. The orb in her left hand has 13 interlocking circles on the design. Amongst other things, this is said to be connected to the Death card and the cycle of life and death we see in nature. We've still got that strong connection to fertility that we've been talking about, and in particular conception. Crowley goes on to say she thus represents the ambition of matter to take part in the great work of creation. Lomas talks about how the Queen represents that idea of bringing life into a barren plain. He says life-giving water to a thirsty earth. What a beautiful concept. What a beautiful tarot card. Her dress alone is worth looking at with a magnifying glass.
The Sforza and Marseille cards show us more or less what we'd expect. The Marseille Queen is looking particularly enamoured by that coin. The Solabusca Queen appears to be thinking long and hard about whether to hit that symbol. Written on the card we see the name Elena, in this case referring to Helen of Troy.
The balance of trade, the respective exchanges are indicated by a woman. She's a brunette because of her field.
She's a brunette because of her field.
And carries the caption below, onto bad because indeed on 1,000 occasions the operations in commerce are risky.
Don't dye your hair brown in a field. It's too risky. If you remember one thing from this entire series, that should be it.
The Hermetic title for the Queen of Pentacles is Queen of the Thrones of Earth.
So obviously we've got the element playing a big part in the Hermetic title for this card, and we can see that on both versions. The Thoth card carries the idea of the Queen giving life to the desert, while the Waite Smith has the Queen sitting quietly in the countryside and just adoring it. I think the concept of Mother Nature is something that's being put across here, the way we sometimes embody the natural world as a life-giving and nurturing goddess. The other title for the card is Queen of the Gnomes, so our favourite lawn ornaments are back for another helping. Apparently gnomes turn to stone when the sun shines on them, so that would explain why there's so many of them sitting around people's gardens.
There's a psychic gnome on the run from the police. She's been described as a small medium at large.
The Queen of Pentacles corresponds to the zodiac signs Sagittarius and Capricorn.
As we know, one star sign simply isn't enough for the court cards because they're far too swanky. In the case of the Queen of Pentacles, that gives us the last decan of Sagittarius into the first 2 decans of Capricorn, in what Lon Milo DeQuette describes as the Adopt a Neighbour's Decan program. Of course that means that Capricorn is the dominant sign, as we would expect because Capricorn is the earth sign, but we've got a little bit of Sagittarius thrown in there too. I think this is the perfect combination for the Queen, because we've got the earthly magic coming from Capricorn with its emphasis on loyalty and sensitivity, combined with the fiery expansive thinking and generosity of Sagittarius. Notable Queen of Pentacles people include Queen Zenobia of Palmyra, Queen Mary of Hungary and Bohemia and Empress of Austria, and Catherine of Aragon, Queen of England and first wife of Henry VIII. This means that I'm also a Queen of Pentacles.
But you said you were the 2 of Pentacles.
I know, right? But I'm also ruled by the Queen of Pentacles, together with the Page and the Ace of Swords. Now if that makes no sense to you, then don't worry, because you're in good company. I haven't got a clue what it means either. However, I have it on good authority that a certain charismatic YouTuber is about to embark on a full series about the Zodiac.
Who's that then?
The Queen of Pentacles resides in the world of Asiya and sits at the 3rd Sephira of Binah, together with the 3 of Pentacles.
We're all the way back up to Binah, the Mother Sephira, and the location of the next character in Lon Milo DeQuette's cosmic fairy tale. He says the Queen is the first He in Yud He Vav He and lives in the 3rd Sephira Binah. We could say that the union of the Queen and King reflects our own experience when, as the Spice Girls once sang about, 2 become 1, the joining together of 2 expressions of consciousness at the very moment of the vinegar strokes could be taken as a glimpse of the divine. He says it is only fitting that this royal couple lives above the abyss in the supernal triad. They unite and become one, as good couples should, and for a moment they enjoy the ecstasy of being one, Keter. Then after a cosmic cigarette, the king rolls over and goes to sleep. Shout out to anyone who enjoys the occasional cosmic cigarette.
The Queen of Pentacles herb is marshmallow. This herb is associated with mothers.
Your mother's been living with us for 20 years. Isn't it time she got her own place?
My mother? I thought she was your mother.
But what does it all mean?
The Queen of Pentacles has been described as the nurturing mother of the material world. Waite says opulence, generosity, magnificence, security, liberty. So I think Waite was referring to the kind of magnificence that comes from being one of the most important matriarchal figures in the whole tarot. I talked earlier about how she's very closely associated with the Empress, but where that card is more concerned with illustrating the archetypal mother, the Queen of Pentacles brings those ideas right down to earth, into something we can actually experience in the physical plane. Now the concept of motherhood is something that I've talked about with all of the queens, but here it goes to the next level. It can include all aspects of being a mother in the practical sense, so the day-to-day things that come with that. I don't want to use the term domestic because I feel like it takes away from the importance of the larger concept, but the fact is, as human beings there's stuff that we have to deal with, like cooking, cleaning, washing and so on. Also, before anyone starts calling me sexist, I'll reiterate that none of these cards are gender specific. I was a single parent, so I remember fitting into that role all too well. I think one of the most important aspects of the Queen of Pentacles is that she finds joy in these things, in making a home and providing a warm, safe and comfortable environment. Now of course that doesn't mean that you have to be a parent in order to do those things. Being nurturing to everyone, friends, siblings, even offering hospitality to strangers in need would fit this description. As with all the queens and the Empress, this also applies to our relationships to our own mothers and the homes that we go back to. Strangely, the universe arranged itself so that I wrote this script on Thanksgiving. Now, as an English person, I don't fully understand the concept of that holiday, but I do know that it tends to be a time when families get together to eat, drink and be merry, so the Queen of Pentacles would be the perfect card for that occasion. Another enormously important aspect is seeing the magic in the everyday, the mundane things that make up our lives. I'm going to talk about this a lot more when I get to the Ten of Pentacles, but the Queen just embodies that whole idea, which I think you can see by the way she's gazing longingly at the pentacle in her lap. Also, there's the idea of self-belief that runs through this card, and that's a big deal. I think the concepts of being grounded in reality and having faith in yourself go hand in hand. Rachel Pollack says she knows and believes in herself and in the magic of her life. In readings, the quality of self-trust will often prove the most important. The Thoth card is in complete agreement with the Waite Smith in this case, and can I just say how happy it makes me when that happens. Crowley says persons signified by this card possess the finest of the quieter qualities. They are ambitious but only in useful directions. They possess immense funds of affection, kindness and greatness of heart.
It is a woman mincing.
Trust Etaila to ruin the whole vibe. The Queen doesn't mince. She's far too elegant for that kind of thing. It's a bit of a grim reading when the Queen of Pentacles appears upside down. Waite says reversed, evil, suspicion, suspense, fear, mistrust. So I don't think we're going in the direction of the fairy tale evil queen that we talked about with the Queen of Swords. Here we seem to be talking about someone who's lost that faith in themselves and become paranoid and filled with self-doubt. Rachel Pollack says in readings the Queen reversed can mean not trusting oneself in some specific situation. She becomes afraid, even phobic, mistrustful of others and especially of herself, doubting her abilities and her value as a person. In a similar way, the Thoth card talks about the Queen losing that sense of magic in the ordinary. Crowley says if ill-dignified, they are dull, servile, foolish. They are drudges rather than workers. Life for them is purely mechanical, and they cannot rise, even seek to rise above their appointed lot.
In the reverse, this card announces an upcoming illness, but it will not last long.
Sounds like a case of the man flu to me. Of course, we men require the utmost sympathy and nurturing at times like that. The big takeaway from the Queen of Pentacles is seeing the magic all around us, believing in ourselves and being a mother to the world. That can come in many forms, but it all boils down to the same thing, the simple desire to take care of people. Victor Hugo once said, "A mother's arms are made of tenderness, and children sleep soundly in them."
As I'm editing this video, I realised that that is a very beautiful quote from one of the most miserable looking people I've ever clapped eyes on.
Let us not ignore the magic all around us, even when we're surrounded by cretins like I am here at Kippy Towers. May the coming days bring you appreciation and gratitude. Until next time.